What if you've never truly been awake? Not in the way you think. You opened your eyes this morning, you made coffee, you checked your phone, you told yourself, I'm awake. But what if that moment, that ordinary, familiar moment, was closer to sleep than you realize? Ouspensky, one of the most penetrating minds of the 20th century, believed that human beings live almost their entire lives in just two states, and that the other two states, the ones that matter most, remain almost completely unknown to them. In this video, we're going to explore those four states, and by the end, you may never look at your own mind the same way again. Welcome to Until Awakening. Today we're going to explore a question that may completely change the way you see your thoughts, your identity, and yourself. If you enjoy exploring ideas about awareness, consciousness, and personal transformation, consider subscribing and joining our growing community. Now take a slow breath, because every awakening begins with a moment of awareness, a moment just like this one. In his book, The Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution, P.D. Ouspensky introduced a map of human consciousness that most people never encounter. He described four distinct states. The first, sleep. The body rests. The mind drifts. We are absent. The second, waking. The eyes open. We move through the world. We call this being conscious. The third, self-awareness. A rare moment where you don't just experience life, you experience yourself experiencing life. The fourth, objective consciousness. A state so uncommon that most people touch it only in brief, fleeting moments, if ever. Here is what Ouspensky found deeply disturbing. Most human beings spend their entire lives moving only between the first and second states. Sleep, and what we mistakenly call waking. The difference between them, he said, is smaller than we think, much smaller than we would like to believe. Think about your day yesterday. How much of it do you actually remember? Not the highlights, not the moments you photographed or told someone about. The actual texture of the hours, the thoughts that passed through your mind while you were driving, the feeling in your chest while you were eating lunch, the quality of your attention during a conversation. For most people, those hours are a blur, not because nothing happened, but because they weren't really there. Ouspensky called this mechanical living. We respond to stimuli the way a machine responds to input. Someone says something, we react. Something goes wrong, we worry. Something familiar appears. We repeat the same thought we've had 1,000 times before. And all of this happens while we are completely convinced that we are conscious, awake, present. And here is what makes this even more unsettling. The mind does not announce its own absence. It never says, I was not really here today. It simply continues, moving from one reaction to the next, constructing a story of a life being lived, while the one who could truly live it remains asleep. This is the central illusion Ouspensky spent his life trying to expose, the belief that ordinary waking life is the same as awareness. It is not. It has never been. The third state is different. In self-awareness, something shifts. You don't just think, you notice that you are thinking. You don't just feel, you sense that you are feeling. There is a quiet observer present, a witnessing quality, a distance between you and the automatic current of your mind. Ouspensky believed this state was possible for human beings, but that it required effort, intention, a kind of internal friction against the pull of sleep. You may have touched this state yourself, a moment in nature when everything went suddenly still inside you, a moment of genuine surprise when your habitual mind paused, a moment of grief or beauty or stillness so complete that you forgot, just for a second, the story of who you are. Those moments were not accidents. They were not random gifts. They were glimpses of what Ouspensky called your possible evolution. And the tragedy, he wrote, is that we do not recognize them when they arrive. We do not stay with them long enough. We do not remember them clearly enough to understand what they were showing us. We return almost immediately to the familiar current of mechanical thought, and the glimpse fades, like a dream we almost remembered upon waking. But something in you knew, something in you paused, and that pause, however brief, was real. The fourth state, objective consciousness. Ouspensky described almost with reverence. It is not something that can be forced or manufactured. It is not a technique or a method you can download or practice for 30 days. It is what becomes possible when the third state is cultivated long enough, deeply enough, consistently enough, that something in the human being begins to stabilize. In this state, perception itself changes. The world is seen not through the filter of personal history, fear, or desire, but clearly, as it is. Without the constant noise of the self, commenting, judging, fearing, and remembering. Most spiritual traditions have a word for this: enlightenment, presence, liberation, awakening. Ouspensky gave it something rarer, a map. And the map begins here, with the simple, radical, and deeply uncomfortable recognition that you may not be as awake as you believe. That the life you are living may be happening mostly in a kind of sleep. A waking sleep so familiar, so continuous, that you have never had reason to question it. That recognition is not a failure. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is, in fact, the first real movement towards something more. Because you cannot wake up from a dream you do not know you are having. And now, for this moment at least, you know. And yet, most of us will return to sleep before this video ends. Not because we are weak, not because we lack intelligence or sincerity, but because sleep is the default. It is the path of least resistance. It is what the body knows, what the mind prefers, what the entire structure of ordinary life is designed to maintain. Ouspensky understood this deeply. He did not teach that awakening was easy. He did not promise that a single insight would change everything. What he taught was far more demanding and far more honest. He said that the movement from the second state to the third requires something he called self-remembering. Not self-improvement, not positive thinking, not the repetition of affirmations, self-remembering. The simple, radical act of turning attention back upon itself, of being here, not just as a body moving through space, but as an awareness that knows it is aware. Try it for a moment right now, not later, now. Notice that you are watching this video. Notice the quality of your attention. Notice whether your mind is fully here or whether some part of it has already drifted to something you need to do, something someone said, something you are quietly worrying about. That noticing, that brief, clear moment of seeing yourself from the inside, is the third state. It is not dramatic. It does not arrive with trumpets or visions. It arrives quietly, like a light being turned on in a room that has been dark for so long that you had forgotten there was a room at all. Ouspensky believed that most people, even those who spend their lives searching for meaning, never genuinely attempt this. They read about consciousness, they discuss it, they find it fascinating, but they do not practice the one thing that could actually shift something, the sustained, humble, patient effort to be present to themselves. And this is where his teaching becomes personal, because the question is not whether these four states exist. The question is, which state are you in right now? Not in theory, not in your best moments. Right now, in this ordinary moment, with this screen in front of you and these words passing through your mind. Where are you? Are you here? Or are you somewhere else? Moving through the motions of a life that feels strangely automatic, strangely familiar, strangely unchanged, no matter how much time passes. If there is even a flicker of recognition in that question, hold it. Don't explain it away. Don't immediately reach for your phone or your next task. Stay with it for just one more breath. Because that flicker, that small, quiet moment of honest seeing, is exactly where Ouspensky said the journey begins. Not in a retreat, not in a book, not in a breakthrough. Here, in this moment, in the simple, courageous act of being willing to see yourself clearly. Thank you for spending these moments with me. If you found value in this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need to hear this message today. And if you'd like to continue exploring consciousness, awareness, psychology, and the deeper dimensions of human transformation, you'll find more videos waiting for you here on Until Awakening. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and remember, every awakening begins with a moment of seeing clearly.